Before you dive into this heart-stopping tale of betrayal, love, and shocking revelations, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because stories like this, filled with pain, power, and poetic justice, are exactly what you don't want to miss. She had been bullied her entire life, a fragile yet resilient soul named Alara who grew up in the shadows of mockery and whispered cruelties, and though she had learned to walk with her head high, inside she still carried the invisible scars of every laugh, every shove, every whispered insult that had trailed her through school, college, and even into the halls of adulthood where she now worked in a thankless corporate environment, overlooked and underestimated. And on one particular evening, after another day of enduring the sly remarks of her colleagues who belittled her appearance, her lack of wealth, and her inability to fit into their designer-clad world, she decided she needed to escape, to breathe, and so she walked into a quiet cafe near her small apartment, where her life would change in ways she could not have imagined, for there she met him, an ordinary waiter with warm eyes and a smile that disarmed her defenses. His name was Adrian, and though his uniform was simple and his hands rough with work, there was something magnetic in the way he looked at her, not like she was invisible, not like she was a joke, but as though she were the only person in the room. One coffee became two, and their conversation flowed with the ease of long-lost companions. And when the rain outside poured harder and she admitted she dreaded returning to her lonely apartment, he offered his jacket, his umbrella, his company, and somehow one thing led to another until she found herself in his modest rented loft, where laughter mingled with vulnerability, where she told him of the years of torment she had endured, and he listened without judgment, and by night's end, the loneliness that had weighed upon her for so long lifted as they shared a night of intimacy born not of lust but of two broken souls finding solace in one another. She woke up embarrassed, afraid that she had made a mistake, certain he would vanish like everyone else who had pretended to care, and though he assured her softly that she was safe with him, she slipped away before dawn, whispering a goodbye she thought would end the fleeting connection forever. But fate, with its cruel and poetic hand, had written a twist far more dramatic, for the very next evening she was invited, much to her surprise, to a grand charity gala by her boss who insisted all employees attend. Though Alara knew her role there was only to stand in the background as the ugly duckling her colleagues mocked, yet she went, donning a simple second-hand dress, bracing herself for the humiliation that would no doubt await, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight that froze her breath when she entered the glittering ballroom and saw Adrian, not in his waiter's uniform, but in a sharp tuxedo, commanding the stage as the host of the gala, introduced by the announcer as Adrian Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, one of the most powerful men in the city. Her heart thundered with disbelief as she realized the man she had shared her most vulnerable night with, the man who had seen her tears, was no ordinary waiter but a billionaire masquerading in disguise, and as the crowd applauded his entrance, she shrank into the shadows, panic coursing through her veins, convinced that he must have played her, toyed with her, that her bullies were right about her worthlessness. But then his gaze swept the room, landed on her trembling figure, and in that moment his eyes softened with the same warmth she had seen in the cafe, and the room seemed to fade away. She tried to slip out, but he descended the stage, ignoring the whispers of the wealthy elite, walking straight toward her, and before the entire crowd he took her hand and kissed it, shocking the room into silence as he declared, "I was hoping to see you again," words that shattered the mockery of her colleagues and painted her in a new light. Yet their story was only beginning, for the weeks that followed were filled with tension as she wrestled with trust, wondering if a man of such power could ever truly want a girl like her, while he struggled to convince her that his disguise as a waiter was his way of escaping the suffocating expectations of his corporate empire, and that his feelings for her were not born from pity but from the authenticity he saw in her. Still, the world around them was cruel. Her colleagues turned envious, the tabloids dug into her past, uncovering every detail of her bullying and painting her as unworthy of a man like him. And just as she began to believe she could not handle the storm, another twist emerged. Adrian's business rival, who happened to be the wealthy father of one of her worst bullies from school, tried to sabotage their relationship, spreading lies that she had pursued Adrian for his wealth, and the whispers grew so loud that Alara, broken once again, left Adrian, convinced she was ruining his reputation. But in the climax of the story, at yet another gala filled with flashing cameras and judgmental stares, Adrian stunned the world by publicly declaring his love for her, recounting how she had reminded him what it meant to be human, how her courage against a lifetime of cruelty inspired him more than any business success ever could. and in a moment that silenced every critic, he asked her to stand by his side, not as a charity case, not as a scandal, but as his equal. The bullies who once laughed at her were forced to watch as the girl they tormented became the woman who won not only love but respect, proving that the strongest revenge is not anger but rising higher than anyone ever thought possible. And though their journey was filled with trials, twists, and battles against a world that wanted to tear them apart, Alara finally embraced the truth that she had always been worthy of love, and in Adrian she found not a savior, but a partner who had seen her scars and cherished them as part of her strength, making their story one not of a fairy tale, but of redemption, resilience, and a love that defied every expectation.